Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special Prog Report podcast. We're back to doing a top five. We realized we hadn't done one of these in a while, busy with a lot of interviews and different things, and everybody's been on vacation this summer. And hopefully everybody's watching has had a good summer, some time off and all that. But we're back at it. Got a few of the gang here together. We got Prog Nick.
Hi, everybody.
We got Victor.
Nice to be back.
Hey, everybody.
And Geoff. How you doing, man?
Hey, nice to be anywhere.
Yeah. So we are going to tackle Prog live albums, which amazingly enough, we have never done. I think we've avoided it because it's entirely too difficult of a challenge, but we're gonna try and pick our five favorites, and we'd love to hear your guys' comments. Not to date this or anything, but if you are watching this, we're filming it in August of 2022, and we're running our Progist challenge on all our socials, which is where we present an album each day and ask you to follow along and sort of refresh on some classics maybe we forgot or some unknown albums, and it's very cool. We love to get your comments on it. So it's on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find the album of the day and check out the comments and follow along. A lot of fun with that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Vic, you want to go first with your number five, and then Geoff, then Nick, and then myself? How does that work?
That sounds great.
All right.
We'll just cut to the chase, and this is a band that when I heard this album at the time that they had come out with this song, I was really paying attention to their drummer. That would be Neil Peart. The band is Rush. Exit stage left.
Hey, right off the bat with a major one.
There you go.
For many that would have been easily number one. So very cool to get that out of the way.
So that's, one of the things that I tried to sort of value a little bit. I can't put this thing not in the top five, but it was recorded in two different places. So it's not like it's one concert where everything came out of that one concert. But, it's a classic album. I can't imagine not having this in the top five. So
cool. I'm glad you covered it. That's great. I'm glad we have it on here. All right. So, Geoff, you want to go with your five?
Yeah. Okay. I haven't really done mine in order of preference, if you like. I've kind of, I think live albums, they fall into a number of categories. So the one I'm starting with for me is a show that I was at, and it's really, really good to get a live album of a gig that you were at. I think at least I enjoy that. So this is this album here, which is Transatlantic, More Never Is Enough. And the audio part of that, so the CD part of that, captures the final night of the Transatlantic World Tour in Manchester, that I was there. I know a lot of people love, and indeed some people may even have picked the what was the night before, which was the London show. But I think the big thing about this, when you listen to it, is it's the final night of the tour. The band are having a lot of fun. I guess they don't have the pressure of having a DVD being recorded. A very, very straightforward track list: The Whirlwind, All of the Above, We All Need Some Light, Duel with the Devil, Bridge Across Forever, Stranger in Your Soul. And you've got it. What can be said about any of those songs? Performed brilliantly with Daniel Gildenlow in the band. Lots of improvisation and little kind of extra bits and pieces added into it. A fantastic performance of The Whirlwind. For me, it's certainly one of the peaks of Transatlantic's catalog. And what more can be said? I've got the t-shirt on. I saw them last week.
So I was almost going to go with World Tour, right? The other one, but not to, I had to find a reason to not pick things versus certain things, right? And to me, as awesome as that is, and if you're there live watching it, that it's amazing because of the amount of music that they played on that tour is insane. But basically it's just 3 albums. Like it's a collection of their first 3 albums, like played straight. So I almost felt like that's it's not
Well,
like picking different songs and making a set list of, you know what I'm talking about? It's not the
but
same thing.
but
So
your honor, it does have a lot of little bits and pieces of difference. For example, We All Need Some Light on this tour is sung by
Sung by
Roie,
Roie. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
they do a lot of little things.
yeah.
So if you've got the Boba Fett bit in Whirlwind, you've got a whole load of those little kind of bits and pieces that they put into it. And I mean, much as I loved the medley that they did at the end of the Absolute Universe tour, you know, when Stranger in Your Soul starts up and you don't get the whole thing,
Yeah.
it's not the same. It's not the
Yeah.
same as getting
No,
the
that
whole
song,
thing.
I
Right?
agree. I agree. Yeah, I
So that
agree.
night we got the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good call,
Um,
Geoff.
All right. So, Nick, what's your
Okay,
first,
so
your first?
I'm going to go way back to 1974 for my number 5 pick, which was a live recording, now a legendary live recording at a legendary venue, by a legendary composer and performer who John Anderson once described to me as the father of progressive rock. And that man is Frank Zappa. And the album is Roxy and Elsewhere. Now, this is quite a significant live album for me for a couple of reasons. The first time I went to America, you know, this kid living in the southern tip of Africa, but I went to America and I naturally went to LA on my first trip, discovered the great wide universe of America, and made a kind of a pilgrim trek to LA and the Whiskey A Go-Go and the Roxy, which are 2 legendary rock clubs in LA. And so not that I saw Frank Zappa ever or at the Roxy, but the Roxy became kind of a significant landmark for me. I saw a few shows there of largely unknown bands. But then when the album was released in 1974, it seemed to me to be just a brilliant sort of collation of everything that Frank Zappa and his band were up until then. There are some songs on it that were never released on studio albums at all, so that makes it a little unique for a live album, and it's a really, really good listen to this day. So Roxy and Elsewhere by Frank Zappa.
Nice. Cool. Some good choices the first round. I gotta go. All right. So I selected mine. I tried to also distinguish between, well, you're right, it's cool if you were at the show, but I tried to not let that influence the reason why I picked an album for, you know, so I left some of those off, because I think my opinion of it is a little skewed because I was there, right? So I tried to just look at live albums I enjoy listening to for whatever reason. And so I'm just going to go with the most recent one, which I still like a lot, and it gets me really in all the right places, which is the Flying Colours. You can't see it live in London, the most recent one. And actually, while the band is awesome and they're always great, the person who steals the show and that whole thing and makes it why I like it is Casey. And I think that his vocals on You Are Not Alone, Cosmic Symphony, a bunch of those songs are just so powerful and emotional and hit you so hard. It's awesome. And, you know, has a bunch of songs in there that while you're watching the Blu-ray even or listening to it, I always feel like I want to applaud in my living room to the stereo, you know. So I particularly love that one a lot. And
I thought you
yeah.
were going to say the person who particularly makes it is the security guard who tries to shoo
Yes, there is also
get
that
Casey
scene.
out of the audience. And that you're talking about live albums of shows that you attended. That is a live album of a show that I had a ticket for, but due to work clash, didn't get to attend. So
Oh, wow.
I'm glad that one exists as well.
Yeah.
Do you think it's better than this one, Roy? Live at the Z7?
Um, Yeah, maybe a little bit. I mean, they're all really close. I actually like the first one because it has all those weird songs of their other bands in there, which is really
Yeah.
cool. And the first show I saw, maybe it was their second show ever in New York of that tour. So I have fond memories of that. But but yeah, again, there's just what else is on here? Um, yeah, I mean, just some of these ballads and stuff that he sings are just so insane that I just think it takes it to another level. So that's what I'm going with from our first round. So,
Yeah.
all right, we got Rush, Transatlantic, Frank Zappa, and Flying Colors. All right, Vic, next one.
So when I put together my list, and I realized what were the first things that I gravitated towards, it was kind of more of a. It surprised me. It was more of a personal historic list. The second one, um, the second album that I'm choosing, it was this band was touring, but it wasn't for this. It wasn't this album tour. It was they had recorded an album. They had recorded the subsequent album and had gone on tour for that subsequent album, but performed Operation Mindcrime. So Queensryche, Operation Live Crime.
That was it. Just missed the cut. Good pick.
It was so I had it originally when it was on VHS, and then eventually got my hands on the actual live CD. And just recently, I actually got the a DVD from it because my VHS tape was just dying, and my VHS player is on its last leg. But Operation Mindcrime, to see it live, to see them pull it off, and it's just a great performance from beginning to end. And that was a tour. I did not get to see that tour. And I was really upset because that was a great set list that they have put together for that. But because I really like Empire as well. But
You didn't see that at the Miami Arena?
I did not see it at the Miami Arena. No.
Me and Rob and all the guys went to that one. What an impression that show left on a bunch of, I don't know, we were 15 at the time or whatever it was. I mean, we were like this when we left. It was so insane. And then a year later, I found out when that VHS was coming out, and I remember going this first day to buy it. And I remember there was like in high school, there was like some football game, and everybody was going to that or whatever. And then there was a party after, and it was like, "Come on, are you coming?" I'm like, "Nope, I have plans." And I went home and watched that VHS by myself, and it was in heaven. It was really like, at the time, no more important experience in my life, I think. Music.
That was the first concert video that I had actually rigged up my stereo up to my VHS to actually hear it through big speakers. And it was a great experience. I remember watching it with my dad and my brother. It was very cool.
Yeah. Nice choice, man. You're really coming strong with your picks.
It's what it's you just look back here and it's like, yeah, that one, yeah. So no, I like what you guys have picked. I'm hoping that because there's so much stuff out there that we won't double up on anything. So we'll see.
All right.
I've a very long list, but I've said to Roy I'd be surprised if any of my choices double up. So next up for me, one of the things I actually meant to ask, and it's probably a general thing about live albums, but there are some live albums that I have on this list that I actually prefer these versions of the songs to the studio versions. And this is probably one of these albums. It's also what's probably a certain type of live album. I would consider Exit Stage Left to be one of these, which is kind of like what I would nearly call a bookend live album, where a live album comes out because it's kind of an end of a phase or an end of an era. Certainly in the case of this one, it was definitely the end of the era, because it is the Thieving Magpie, like Gazaladra, which is the very last album the Marillion put out with Fish as lead singer. And it's a summary really of all of the albums that came before, tracks recorded from 1984 excuse me, tracks recorded from 1984 through to 1987 onto their last tour. 3 tracks from the first album, 3 tracks from the second album, all of Misplaced Childhood, and 4 tracks from Clutching at Straws. So you've pretty much got a Marillion anthology right there. And I think particularly the versions of the earlier albums, which probably with different band members and different production didn't sound so good, sound absolutely amazing on this live album. A fantastic version of all of Misplaced Childhood played back to back. And yeah, all in all, just a really, really good live anthology of that era.
Awesome. Another good choice. Another band that belongs on our list. So nice one. Nick, are you up?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm now going to go to a young band that is very often overlooked by music websites, and I think we've been a little bit guilty of that ourselves. So I'm going to give them a big shout out now today. Having just seen them on Cruise to the Edge, without a doubt, one of the best vocal harmony groups in the world, and for me, instrumentally, also one of the greatest technical progressive rock groups in the world, and that is from Sweden, Moon Safari, who released a live album called Live in Mexico some years back. And I just, the sonic quality of this album is astounding. It sounds as good as the band do live, so I highly recommend it to anybody. I'm very glad to see that Moon Safari are back there in the studio again. They're about to release a new album again, and they certainly impressed on Cruise to the Edge massively. So I really think they deserve a mention here. A Moon Safari live in Mexico. Give it a listen.
Nice.
I'll say that I think the reason why they don't get a lot of coverage, generally speaking, is simply that during these last 5, 6, 7 years, where you've had more websites and more and all the socials and the YouTube videos and all the stuff going on, there's a lot of stuff going on. They haven't done anything. They haven't released anything. When is the last album from? Like, it's been a while.
It's a good 5 years, yeah.
Yeah, so they just haven't been around to take advantage of a lot of that. But certainly, they release something tomorrow, I know we'd cover it. But on Cruise to the Edge, for sure. I mean, they're always one of the favorites. That's why they keep getting asked back. So, good guys too, real nice guys. All right, am I up already? All right. Well, when we were doing this, there was no doubt I was going to pick something from this band. It was just a matter of which one of their various live albums I was going to pick. Because I think particularly their live albums are in many ways better than the studio records. And I think that they always present something awesome. And I just love them so much. So I'm going to go Big Big Train, and I'm picking the Merchants of Light one. And, man, there's so many goosebump moments on this. I got to tell you, I was listening to it again, just flipping around. It's just like when they have the real horns on stage and the beginning of Folklore comes in, it's like, forget it. It just makes me crazy. And Swan Hunter on here, I mean, is insane. David's vocals on that. And, of course, East Coast Racer and Telling the Bees and closing with Wassail at the end is just awesome. All their live albums are great. I think just set list wise, this one has a few more of my favorites on it. But I don't know. It's sort of pick whichever one you want. But yeah, I'm going to go Merchants of Light. And live, man, there's very few better bands. And I've just still have yet to see them. And hopefully, Geoff, you're going to get to, I hope.
Yeah, the
We'll
legal
see.
system permitting. Yeah, did I tell the guys? I'm on the list for, don't put this in the show. I'm on the list for jury service from the 12th of August to the 30th of September, which means that I have to phone a voicemail at 5 p.m. every day to find if I'm required the following day. But the 2nd of September, I have a ticket for the Aylesbury, the first proper BBT show on the tour. So I'm going next Friday, and I have a number of things that I really would ideally, well, I have a week where I need to look after the kids because my wife's at school. So I'm going to be putting a list of dates that I hopefully won't be available. Hopefully they'll be amenable to that.
But you did see them live.
Well, I have seen them. Yeah, I saw them on the.
Was it this tour?
Yeah.
Was it the 2018 tour? Wasn't it?
Yeah. And Nick, you were at that. The Merchants of Light shows was the one you were at, wasn't it?
Yeah. I went to all 3 nights with Mark McCormick. Yeah.
How good was that?
Amazing, utterly amazing.
Yeah, just one of the things that really breaks my heart that I can't ever see them with him live.
They're a band that sonically, Geoff described the concert that he went to, and it struck me how he described it, that it was just the most perfect sounding live experience, how you were just engulfed in a perfect mix and perfect production of sound, and it was live. That sounds very, very intriguing and appealing.
Rob Aubrey, their sound guy, I think he's kind of like the extra, virtually the additional band member. But you were talking about the horns, and I'm sure Nick will feel this. It sounds great on the album. When you hear it blasting in a big venue, it's like nothing else you've ever heard before.
Yeah.
That feeling of air moving out of those brass instruments, you've got to be there to understand how powerful it sounds.
I get it. Yeah, it's what makes them special. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're back around to Vic, number 3.
Nick, you had me nervous when you're talking about Cruise to the Edge because I thought you were going to bring up these guys.
Maybe you will.
No, this band plays Cruise to the Edge. They played Progressive Nation, which is where initially I learned about them, and they put out a live album back in 2017, which really framed what they had done back then. They were on their 10th anniversary tour, and this is Haken, and their live CD is live with a 1 instead of live one live, however you want to put it. But it's a great set list, and it really captures their live performance as well. They when they put together a show, and I have seen them on the cruise, I've seen them a couple of times on small venues, on a little bit bigger venues, and they sound pretty close to what you hear on their studio stuff, which is not easy to play, but they're all sharp. They're all right there where they need to be. And this album really captures those performances well. When you hear their live stuff, the drums sound very well produced. The guitars are very well balanced. The vocals are, very well grooved into the mix. So it's a great quality mix, and it's got a great set list. And it's combining 2 shows from Amsterdam, and then you got some songs from Prog Power. But it's cool to hear their older stuff with the skill set that they have now. It kind of modernizes their stuff a little bit, but it's a lot of fun to listen to, and they're one of my favorite bands, and they're awesome live. I don't tire in seeing them live. They have such a vast amount of music that you can go to different concerts, hear entirely different music. And Geoff, safe to say, you can go to a concert, not hear Cockroach King, and still hear some amazing music. So, so Haken gets my 3rd spot.
That's my go-to Haken album. I really like it. I really like that live album. It's got all the stuff that I like best on it.
Cool, great one, awesome. All right, Geoff, you're next.
Me, fairly safe. I think it's fair to say that if we did Prog Report top live albums and nobody mentioned this, probably we'd get letters in the mail. So I'm going to go for it. 1973, Yes Songs. I have a lovely Japanese CD here that does the full fold-out triple live album, mostly capturing the first tour that Alan White played with the band. And really, I mean, I think it's the birth of a different sort of sounding Yes with a different drummer on it. Bill Bruford's on a couple of the tracks. But obviously the tour promoting Close to the Edge, and it's got that whole album on it. It's got Most of Fragile. It's got a good part of the Yes album. But it's very, very energetic. And we talk about sort of the connection between maybe something like Haken and classic era prog. You listen to some of Steve Howe's guitar playing, and while stylistically it's not anything like the Haken guys, but in terms of speed, in terms of clarity, in terms of what he is doing in this album, it's an absolute showcase for him. Rick Wakeman on keyboards, probably with a bit more sort of primitive keyboard technology, so doesn't quite, you can't quite get a church organ sound, couldn't quite get a church organ sound on stage in 1973. But I mean, it's just a quintessential. Again, we wouldn't get through a list program without that word, so it's a quintessential.
I think it's one of the 4 or 5 that we had to do. So good choice on that one. Sense. All right, Nick.
Okay, so Geoff has raised one of the bigger 70s prog bands, and I have no doubt, Roie, that you're not going to let me down, and you're going to raise one of the others. So I guess that I will go with how can we have a top live albums list without Pink Floyd's Pulse
right on
in it. So it's just an amazing package in every respect. This is one of the great bands that I never saw live, to my great regret. And I guess this has to be second prize to everybody who never had the privilege of seeing Floyd live. It's just an amazing package. Look,
you have the one with
these
the light.
Fabulous photographs. Yeah, you got the light, Geoff. Yeah. My light went out.
I changed the battery. I took the packaging apart and I put a new battery in. It still flashes.
There you go. Good man. I mean,
there's videos of how to do it on YouTube.
Just look at this amazing booklet here. I hadn't taken this out in a number of years, but what a package for its time, and what sonic quality, and of course the band itself and the whole of Dark Side of the Moon being played.
Yeah,
you can't have a best of live albums list without this one.
No, that's a great one. I was also hoping somebody was going to pick it. So very cool. I think that's the one. I mean, that's really, as far as a collection of songs by one band, that's it's a pretty flawless collection on one live album.
I don't know if you guys saw, I mean, it's not an official live album, but Mike Portnoy made a post the other day about the Pink Floyd, the 1974 set list. And that the live on the Immersion 2 CD versions of Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here, you have the live versions from that time, which are very, very powerful, with a much smaller band than obviously they had in the days of the latter period. But yeah, a phenomenal live band in every incarnation, in my opinion.
Yeah, very cool. All right, good choice. All right, so for my third one, actually, for the first time, I brought out all the CDs because I was looking to see which ones I'm going to pick, so I ended up just keeping them here. So I was going to go with a different route from this artist because I went immediately to, all right, who are the artists that I typically would buy a live album from? And then I started from there. And then I realized that I actually like this, his original band live stuff better. Porcupine Tree, Arriving Somewhere from 2006. The Dead Wing Tour. It's great. I mean, it has all the great songs: Arriving Somewhere, Sound of Music, Even Less, Trains, Buying New Soul, one of my odd favorites, So-Called Friend, B-side. There's a bunch of them of really cool songs in there. The sound quality is great. I was re-listening to a little bit of this, and they're just, I always go back to it. It's like I love all his stuff, and I love the solo records and everything. But there's something about the first few that, or I should say, that middle era of all the great Porcupine Tree albums where they were just peak awesomeness. You know, around that time of Deadwing, I just always go back to, like, that was the best band around that time. Just hitting on all cylinders live. Gavin on drums. The songs were just great. And as good as everything has been since, it just doesn't. You go back to listening to this, and it just reminds you how awesome of a band they were in the early 2000s. So that's the one I'm going. I almost went with the Home Invasion solo live show, which is amazing, but I think more when you watch the Blu-ray. Certainly if you were there, that's a whole nother thing. But the live Blu-ray, because the visual of that show and how it's presented is amazing. It's just unbelievable. But when you just look at the set list on the back of the CD, you're like, I don't like that song, and I don't like that song, and I don't really like that song. So it's sort of, I ended up not picking it based on set list a little bit. But yeah, so anyway, that's the one.
A slightly interesting sidebar, but I suppose, there seems now that basically every tour has a live album. Has a live.
It's album live, album live, album. Yeah.
Every band, pretty much every album. Whereas I suppose a lot of these earlier, take Yes songs. There's like kind of 3 absolutely rock solid classic albums. And if that was today, there'd be a live album from every tour. And yet, I know you and I have talked about this, Roy, that in sales terms, probably live albums don't really seem to do the same amount of business as a studio album does.
No.
And so presumably the reason they exist is because people like to have them, and because if they don't exist,
and also Geoff, interestingly enough, live albums are a lot cheaper to produce, of course, than studio albums.
Yeah.
So the advances that are paid to the bands are very often non-existent or very small. And that being the case, they're very profitable for record labels. So live albums are a good release, and they're going to carry on being released, I think.
And they become a thing where, especially now, it's like that completist thing, Yeah. These legacy bands that are so far down the line, right? They're at least release another album. It's album number 14, and there's another live album. At this point, you're just like, all right, I'll buy that too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, but yeah, I don't think they released a live album before this one. It was just Coma Divine, right? There were some bootleg ones that I know existed, but
there was an early one as well, whose name like Circus something, after the second or third album. But yeah.
So yeah, you're right. Okay, Vic.
So this album, it came to the forefront of my mind because I have been sort of immersing myself in this band. So shout out to Jeff Wagner and Destination Onward for his work in documenting the Fates Warning story. Their live album, Still Life, I love this album because I am a fan of Pleasant Shade of Grey, and they play all 12 sections of the song in its entirety from start to finish. Which, by the way, on an aside, the podcast with Mark Zonder was really cool to hear him explain, how much he loves that album, and just how proud he was in the fact that they were able to perform it from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And just how challenging that was, but how rewarding it was. So it was neat to have that recorded live. Their Fates Warning, their live recordings, there's just something that's a little bit more raw and a little bit heavier in their sound. It's almost the distortion on the guitars in the studio sound a little bit sterile. Live just has a lot more, bite. So I really enjoy just the the sound quality of the live album. And then, the rest of the songs that they play, they play the Ivory Gate of Dreams. When you listen to No Exit, the studio quality of that is not that great, but to hear it live and to improve the sound that much, and to hear that song in its entirety, really shows itself very well. And then you've got the 11th Hour, Point of View, Monument, so it's a terrific set of songs that just represent them really well on, and it sounds great. And so they earned a spot on my list, which, again, I probably am a little bit biased right now because I've been so Fates centered with all the cool stuff that's been coming out. So Still Life.
Yeah, awesome, great. Cool to have Fates Warning on there. All right, Geoff, your next one.
Okay, I'm down to my last two.
I wish you
think
did yours in an order though. Because like
no, I couldn't really do that.
I'd be curious how it would work out.
Yeah, well, no, I haven't done them in order, and I think probably the last two choices might surprise you. But again, these are both live albums that I listen to a lot, which is why they're near the top. And live albums that I probably listen to in preference to the equivalent studio versions. So I think that's why they're deserving of being here. I think these two might surprise you. I was a little bit worried at the very, very start because this choice is Rush, A Show of Hands.
Wow.
And this was probably one of the first Rush albums that I actually bought. And I think Exit Stage Left covers up to sort of the Signals era, I think. And this then kind of covers Hold Your Fire, Power Windows, Grace Under Pressure. I think there's one track from Signals on it. Well, anyway, there's one track from Signals on it. I can't remember which one it is. But I love the energy of the performances of stuff like Big Money, Subdivisions. The version of Mission on there is amazing. The version of Marathon on there is incredible. Distant Early Warning, Force 10, Time Stand Still. I just think there's a real energy, whereas the studio versions of those tracks, they're great and they're definitive, but I think kind of the keyboard sound and the drum sound, particularly, and the whole interplay of the band is just something else in this album, and it's pretty much a sort of greatest hits or best of that whole era, which is probably my favorite Rush era. And again, a sort of another bookmark type album because right. what they went on to do after that was less keyboard heavy, and sort of more back to. And
then there was another live album a few albums later with different stages. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, different stages. Yeah, so that's definitely one of my, when I fancy listening to Rush, that's one of the ones that I pretty much grab straight away.
Cool, nice one. All right, Nick.
Okay, having gone a little obvious in the last one, I'm gonna go a little less obvious this time around, and this is a kind of a 2-in-1 hybrid, if you like, because it's two bands delivering one live album, and they call themselves Tangecanic.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which is, of course, one of my favorite bands, Car Mechanic, and another one of my favorite bands, The Tangent, who went on the road together. The album is called Hotel Can't Afford It, which kind of says it all. Typical Jonas Rheingold and Andy's sense of humor, I suppose. Sonically, it's a great recording. The audience noise does get a little bit in the way sometimes, so that's just a minor little criticism of it. But I find myself going back to this album again and again and again and again because it's just so listenable, and the track selection is excellent. The performances are great. They had a new drummer in Steve Roberts on this tour. And the result was just exceptional. Only a limited edition release, I think. So I'm sorry if this frustrates anyone out there who can't get hold of it. But if you can get your hands on it, give it a listen. It's a really, really good live recording.
Nice pick. I
I've
like
got-
it. A little bit out of the box, but very cool choice.
I've got it.
Yeah, good bands.
I love the song title, "A Message to Your Heart." Is that what it's called? Or I love
Message
the
from the
version.
Heart.
Message from the Heart. I love the version of that on that album. I think it's just outstanding.
Yeah.
Nice.
Go on, Edmund.
All right, so
Awesome.
for my number 2 choice, I think I may run the risk of picking something that before someone else picks it as their first choice. It might happen, but I think this is a close call for my top 2 choices. But as far as collection of songs, and I guess sort of bookending a period of a band, you can't get better than live scenes from New York, and the group of songs on here. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You know, Scenes from Memory, obviously. Then you got the second disc, which has Metropolis, Mirror, a bunch of stuff from Falling into Infinity. They do Acid Rain. It's ridiculous. And then that could be enough. And then you get a third disc of, Erotomania and Voices, Silent Man. And then you still have Learning to Live. And then when that's all done, you still have Change of Seasons. It's ridiculous. I mean, and this is the original version with the, Empire State, World Trade Towers. And we won't go into that whole thing, but this is arguably number 1. I don't know that you can beat this. I went with a different one for my number 1, but this is about as good as it gets as live albums goes. So, Vic, may I present your choice? I just knew it.
I mean, you brought it up really well. I'll add another one to my list because this was, I'll say, like 5B perhaps. It was but yeah, it's that one would have been number 1, but it gives me an opportunity to talk about another band that I love, another band that I've been following since, the earliest I can remember listening to music out of my uncle's speakers. And the band is Kansas, and this is the live album back in 1978, Two for the Show. It opens up with Song for America, and it just doesn't stop. And for a live album, the quality is terrific. To hear Steve Walsh just wail like he can wail, and just his voice is absolutely amazing. And these guys are just locked in. The set list is absolutely incredible. It's a great collection.
Hello, guys. Welcome to Africa. We have what's called load shedding, which is rolling blackouts. And they happen unexpectedly at the most inopportune time. And I'm really sorry. So I've got my battery light on here.
So back then, when a live album came out and it had a collection of, because it was not like it is now where you had album, live. Back then, when a live recording came out, it was a great thing to have because it was kind of like you were making your own mixtape, but it was a greatest hits collection. And, for early Kansas, if anybody wants to get into Kansas, trying to figure out their early stuff and everything else, the list of songs that are on here is just the best of the best from that era. And, that's why I love that album. They play the magnum opus, they play Journey from Maria Braun. They play Portrait, they play The Wall. It's a great collection of songs and excellent quality, and it's a lot of fun to listen to.
Interestingly enough, though, if I remember, I don't have the set list in front of me, but like Carry On Wayward Son is not at the end.
No,
right? It's like somewhere in the middle.
Okay, so the set list, Carry On Wayward Son was the 6th song. So Song for America, Point of No Return, Paradox, Icarus, Portrait He Knew, Carry On Wayward Son, then Journey from Maria Braun, Dust in the Wind, Lonely Wind, Mysteries and Mayhem, The Wall, the magnum opus, Child of Innocence, Belex's Cheyenne Anthem, Lonely Street, Miracles Out of Nowhere, The Spider, Closet Chronicles, Down the Road, Sparks of the Tempest, and Bringing It Back.
This is a weird
That's
set
the
list.
that's the extended CD version, isn't it? 'Cause
That
the
came
original,
that's recent, isn't that?
the original one had much fewer songs than that, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Nick, you want to go ahead and jump in on yours in case?
Yeah, man, I'm so sorry about this. The lights have gone out here. Now, we got to go with another big 70s act here for my last one. Roy, I'm kind of counting on you. I'm still counting on you to bring up the other one.
Okay.
Okay, but of course, I think we have to mention one of the greatest live acts in Prague ever, which is Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Now, I could have gone with Welcome Back, My Friends, or I guess, to be a little bit off the wall, we could go with Pictures and Exhibition. I don't know if you can see that. Hope you can. It is technically a live album.
It's upside down.
Oh, sorry. There you go. I can't see a thing. Okay, so Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Pictures at an Exhibition. I mean, it is a live album, but they never released any studio versions of the material, so that makes it kind of unique. Wonderful album, kind of one of the soundtracks of my youth, really.
Cool. All right, so we skipped you, Geoff. Sorry, I just want to make sure we had Nick give one just in case, but you're number one.
Well, it's good we put a little bit of a gap between it because I too have a Dream Theater album, but not live scenes. I have Live at the Marquee.
Okay.
Yeah.
My first ever Dream Theater album, which I bought because I'd heard a little bit of them. This was kind of a sort of more of an EP priced album, and so back in the days when I was a student, it was a bit of a lower risk purchase. But I love the versions of the songs in this. Like, they're really good. I say it was the first I've heard of them. You put it on, and the first thing you hear is a live version of Metropolis, which is just so powerful, amazing. Again, not knowing the history of the band, A Fortune in Lies is track 2. Didn't know it was from another album. Just sounded like a great song to me. I certainly think that version's way better than the original album. Sorry, Cal Graves. Next up, Bombay Vindaloo, which is an instrumental that's only in this album. I think foreshadowing the sound of and the improvisation of LTE and stuff like that. Very atmospheric. Surrounded, a brilliant version of it, brilliant vocal in it. And then Killing Hand with, again, another sort of improvisation, another hand before it, and then a killer version of Pull Me Under that's just mind-blowing. Again, as a listen from start to finish, as a live album, it's not the full show for sure, but I think it's an absolutely, certainly I think these are my favorite versions of certainly Surrounded and Pull Me Under and Metropolis are the ones that are in this album.
Wouldn't it be fair to say, Geoff, that James Labrie proved a point with that album, because he delivered live and silenced all the critics as far as I'm concerned, particularly those songs that you mentioned.
Well, the other live album from them that was on my short list that I like a lot is the Budokan one, which I think is great, very heavy.
Great set list.
It has instrumentally on there.
Yeah.
I've got the VHS of that. It must be a collector's item.
Very cool. So they have a few really good live releases.
And Once in a Lifetime, I think, is a brilliant album.
That's a great one too.
Yeah,
exactly. So all right, so we're down to my last one then. All right, so no brainer for me. It's always going to be the number one, and I think this is what Nick was referring to, but we're going to go Seconds Out.
I could have guessed that.
I mean, it's to this day, it's just so good. And I've been listening to, because I saw Steve Hackett on his Seconds Out tour, and even with that band performing those songs, the minute they kick in the Squonk as the opening song, it's just like, it's so good, man. It's like amazing. Everything on here is flawless. It has all the great songs. You go towards the end. I mean, you're going from Musical Box, the ending, to Supper's Ready, to Cinema Show, to Dance on a Volcano. It's insane. The one thing I could never figure out, Geoff, you and I talked about this, was why it's called The Carpet Crawl on Seconds Out.
Right.
I can't find why that is. I'm sure somebody out there knows.
Wikipedia says both names are correct. Carpet Crawlers or The Carpet Crawl, both are officially correct.
I guess, but I don't know why they decided to make that change here on this album. And I actually think some of it, like Robbery. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it's the Carpet Crawl when they leave out the intro.
The Robbery, Assault, and Battery, I think, is a better version on here in particular, because I was never really fond of that song, but live it really works great. And it's just the standout live album of all of them. I think they just nailed it. And of course, it has Bill Bruford on drums and on a song as well, so it's very cool stuff.
I think the thing about it, a couple of things about it. You mentioned Steve Hackett. He has done a Seconds Out themed tour. How many? I can understand how Steve Hackett could play, Foxtrot or Selling them by the Pound. How many bands can do a kind of classic album tour playing their live album? I think the second thing about it is that I think it proved that Phil was basically capable of tackling the entire catalog. And I know from some of the Genesis fan pages and forums, many people rate that as the definitive version of Supper's Ready, despite the fact that it doesn't feature Peter Gabriel. My inroad to Genesis was Three Sides Live. I didn't put it on my list, but another great live album. But that album was the first. That was I kind of started there and worked backwards. So that was the first time that I had heard pretty much any of those Gabriel era songs, was hearing them sung by Phil. And then you hear the Gabriel versions, and some of them you go, particularly that Musical Box ending, I was really disappointed when I heard the Foxtrot version of it, because it's just not as good. It's not as good as that.
I wonder if you hear the live version first, because it's really powerful. Yeah. So
love that one, and didn't put it on my list because I absolutely knew that was your number one.
Pretty obvious. I mean, these are some great records, like between all of these, they're just all so powerful and strong. It's great stuff. The live album, I think, sometimes gets overlooked, but when it's the era of the 70s, especially when it was like the thing, the live album was really important. Well, you want to get into some honorable mentions. Nick, you talked about wanting to bring in stuff like Thin Lizzy and things like that, but we limited it to Prog because otherwise we're opening up a whole can of worms of amazing live albums. But I think I have a bunch that I like outside of Prog as well. So you want to go around and pick some of those that you like?
Yeah, okay. So non-Prog, I just think that Grand Funk Railroad, their live album that I think it was 1975 or 6, if I'm not mistaken, just brilliant, utterly brilliant. I listen to that as much as any live Prog album. And also Thin Lizzy Live and Dangerous, I think is just an excellent album. But going back to Prog, I'd like to give a mention to It Bites live in London, PFM's A Celebration live, and Wishbone Ash's live dates. Wishbone Ash kind of Prog adjacent, I suppose. But all great listens. And as I said earlier, record labels are going to keep releasing live albums as technology improves, the sonic quality improves, and they're still cheap to make and profitable for record labels. So we can look forward to a lot more. Yeah.
And for anyone playing the Prog Report Top 5 podcast drinking game, Nick has just mentioned It Bites and Wishbone Ash, so you need to take 2 shots at this point. And I've mentioned Three Sides Live, so you're going to be well on at this point.
Yeah.
My longer list, other ones, Live and Dangerous, absolutely. There's lots of Spock's and Neil Morse related albums I could have put in. The ones I sort of had on my longer list, the Spock's Beard Gluttons for Punishment album, I think, is an absolutely brilliant one. Snow Live from Morsefest. Not just because it's Snow Live, but because a brilliant version of June and an incredible version of Falling for Forever. I also had Kansas Device voice drum as well. I love it. I love the DVD of it, and I love hearing Steve Walsh singing "Fight Fire with Fire" and "Play the Game Tonight," which he didn't sing in the originals. I had Seconds Out down. I had Live Scenes down. Made Again by Marillion, the album that has a full version of Brave, and Nick mentioned the Floyd Pulse. David Gilmour live in Gdansk is another fantastic album, and DVD Blu-ray as well.
Vic, you got a few?
I was gonna bring up. Hold on. I was gonna bring up the live snow at Morsefest because I was not able to go, and I just remember framing that the first time I ever met Prog Nick was at Progressive Nation, and I remember him stepping up one day when we were having the morning worship with Neil, and Nick gets up there, shares his testimony, and he said that the greatest thing for him would be to see Snow live because it was never toured, because obviously before the album was released, Neil had announced that he had left the band and it would not be performed with that lineup. So that was really special. And then another thing, and this was something that came out live, but it was one song. It was also in Morsefest. But one of my greatest thrills in witnessing a live performance was sitting between Nick and Roie when in 2018, Neil decided to perform The Great Nothing. And I tell you what, I'm glad that it was recorded and it was released as an EP. And that song itself made Morsefest 2018 awesome for me. But to sit there and experience that next to these two guys that were sitting next to me, in tears, just not believing what we were watching and how great it sounded and just what an amazing experience that was. That's one of those that will always rank high for me. Wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very
God
nice.
bless you.
Here.
That's the thing. I mean, I have so many Neil Morse live albums between the solo records and the various different bands and NMB performing Similitude and The Great Adventure with the Great Medley Encore, which is ridiculous, and Snow Live, Morsefest 2015. I might pull out of those as pretty special because that was just a random collection of a bunch of songs. That's right. And was that my first Morsefest? I think it was. So, you could put those all in their own little bucket. We could do a top 5 Neil Morse live albums podcast probably.
I think
some other ones, though outside of that, talking about Genesis, the Steve Hackett live at the Royal Festival Hall with the orchestra.
Yes.
Yeah. Particularly awesome. Really cool versions of Dancing with Moonlit Night with the orchestra and Afterglow. They're really special versions. If you haven't heard that and you like Genesis and you haven't checked, I mean, that is great. That's a must. But if I'm going outside of Prog, Kiss Alive 2, that was important to me growing up, a big one. Yep. Certainly, this is off the wall for our group of people, but this was, I sat with this box set for days and days and days when it first came out as a kid, and it's this Bruce Springsteen 75 to 85, 5 LP collection, which was just obsessed with that, which was amazing. Led Zeppelin Celebration Day, just killer. Queen live at Wembley, can't go wrong with that. So there's a bunch that are.
I can't believe that I've got without mentioning that Queen Live Killers, which is the album that I look at as being how I got into this whole music thing as a 9 or 10-year-old. I was one person I knew was selling it to another person, and I was given it and asked to bring it to them, and I put it on, and I would say that's why there's a red special guitar sitting somewhere behind here, and why I've got about six copies of Queen's Greatest Hits, despite the fact that I've already got all the tracks on the albums already.
Right.
And yeah, so those are yeah, all of those are brilliant albums.
Yeah, they were fun, and you're right. For a lot of those were greatest hits albums at the time. There were different versions and stuff that you didn't get to see.
Well, I mean, I think I maybe said this before, but but you think of a band like Genesis. How many best of Genesis have there been in the last 20 years? There's probably one comes out every 5 years. They do a compilation, but in those bands' heyday, they greatest hits. Like Queen's Greatest Hits in 1981 was probably one of the first, apart from the Eagles one maybe, but it was one of the ones that kind of made record companies realize, hey, look, we can actually, sell lots of this. I mean, I think that probably, like, can you imagine if the concept had existed in the 1960s and they'd put out a Beatles album with all the singles on it? But I think probably the first ones that Nick
weren't those the blue and red ones? Weren't those like
But like they were 74, I think they were like 73, 74, 75 when those came out. And that was really what put that on. I think a lot of the prog bands and rock bands that, they were, they didn't really have hits, right? They, in fact, putting out singles wasn't the thing they did. So they didn't have greatest hits albums. And so the live album was very much the thing that you went to if you wanted to get a broad sweep of their material. So
yeah. No, right on. Totally. Yep.
Well, I guess you'd have to add Deep Purple Made in Japan there.
Right. Yep.
Pretty much a great example of that.
Well, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of people pointing out the Jethro Tull one too. Busting Out, right?
Busting Out.
That's another good one from that era. So, yep, good stuff, guys. That was a lot of fun. We got to get back to doing more top fives. So, you know what? Anybody watching this, if you have ideas for top fives that you want to see us cover that maybe we haven't done, drop us a shout. Let us know. And, try and get back to doing some more of these things. All right, gentlemen.
Cool.
Always fun.
Thank you, everybody.
See ya.
Lights out from South Africa.